So you mentioned how this was obviously a process that was used quite a bit in the cannabis boom. And I know some of your background is in cannabis as well. You started a cannabis brand yourself, is that right?
Yeah, we started a company called High Noon. So we were fortunate with our agency early on to do a lot of work with the early cannabis companies in Canada pre-legalization. They
Mm,
set up and started developing and growing with the medical framework that was pre-recreational. And so we were working with these companies, and we were fortunate enough to be on the ground when a lot of the early brands started to get built before legalization in anticipation of the recreational market opening. And so we were involved in building and helping scale a lot of these brands, which was, even now it's difficult, but back then, that you don't have the same tools in the toolkit to build out this brand. You can't advertise on
mm,
Facebook bans you can't advertise
mm,
on Google. And with Health Canada restrictions, you can't show lifestyle imagery. You can't really use influences in the same way. You can't speak about the benefits of the product. There's all these kind of rules and restrictions. And so we got pretty good at building brands that were within that, weren't treading on any kind of regulatory issues, but also once recreational cannabis went legal, actually scaling them without relying on the usual D2C channels that
mm.
every consumer brand relies on. And so we started doing that. And after a year, we thought, we can do this for ourselves and we can build out some
Sure.
products for ourselves. And so what we thought about very early on was, cannabis is a commodity like any other commodity. And early on in Canada, there was an artificial restriction of supply because it was very expensive to grow cannabis. Only a few LPs were able to do it, which meant the prices were essentially artificially high. The supply was very limited. But over time, you would see more and more supply, and there would be a price compression. The commodity price would drop. And the only way that you build out products and keep margin is through doing what Heineken, thinking about cannabis in the same way that Heineken does, which is as a CPG product where you're building a brand, you're building relationships with consumers. So they're buying it not just based on this raw commodity, but on the relationship they have with the product and the brand. And so we also wanted to eschew this model that was going on, still goes on, of vertical integration. Everybody talks about vertical integration in the cannabis world, and it's starting to happen in the psychedelics world as this advantage. And I've never seen it as an advantage. If you're trying to be a farmer, cultivator, brand developer, drug developer, distributor, all in the same company, I just don't think it's going to work. I don't think you can specialize in all of those things. I'd say the only exception really is a company like Tesla, but that's Elon Musk. Like, yeah, Elon Musk can do anything he wants, but
Sure.
for everybody else, it's rarely an advantage. So Starbucks don't grow all of their coffee. They
Yep.
say that they source the best coffee from around the world. They have these educational facilities where they're empowering and helping out localized farmers. And they do have some reserve farms that they wholly own. But for the most part, they don't grow their own raw ingredients, and Heineken doesn't grow their own hops. And we didn't think we'd have to grow our own cannabis or grow our own raw materials for the products that we were going to develop. So we
Mm,
wanted to focus on formulation and product stacks and brand, and then putting those products into market and building relationships with our consumers. So we put out a pre-roll product, and we've got a vape on the market. We're launching some gummies pretty shortly. And yeah, it's a wicked experience. And so
wow.
that product's still going. It's got its own management team, and it's rocking and rolling. We're now seeing the thesis come to life, which is what I like about it. Like, now we're seeing a
Uh-huh.
massive drop in commodity prices. We're seeing the big Canadian licensed producers really suffer. There's too much cannabis. They're all now trying to scramble to grow and build better brands, to build relationships with consumers. And of course, they don't do it that well because they've all been focusing on building these enormous facilities to grow cannabis. And now they're trying to get in that game. There were a few great companies early on that recognized this Origin House. That was a Canadian company that saw the US and saw this model. And so they did something similar. There was a company called Slang that does something similar. So taking a kind of CPG model and applying it to the cannabis space.
So what was the key to unlocking distribution and marketing then? If you were limited by the at least traditional DTC channels, was it going B2B or was it some other content play? What was the unlock there for you?
Yeah, so Canada's got very specific channels. So the government essentially buys the weed from you, and then they have their online store. So in Ontario, it's the OCS,
Oh,
and then retailers then buy it from the government. So it's fairly convoluted, but
interesting.
you're not selling it on, you're not driving D2C sales directly.
Mm,
We would try and come up with really nice kind of visuals and vanity mocks, knowing that in the store, it would look nothing like that. But
yep,
we're
yep.
building up brands online, on socials, albeit on socials, it's quite hard. A lot of Instagram accounts are getting shut down still because they don't love this content because it's still federally legal in the US, and that's where they take their lead from. So there's a lot of different things that we thought about. There's specific networks that you can advertise on, programmatic exchanges that you can reach people through. Some platforms are much more lenient than others. So Twitter, in the right circumstances, you can advertise in Canada. Snapchat has got some great kind of cannabis products that you can advertise through. We would do just content marketing and seeding on communities like Reddit, experiential events. You can do some things. And also, in Canada, there's no better person to market to than the bud tenders, the people actually recommending in the dispensaries, talking about the product, that have a relationship. And so building relationships with those people and explaining about our product and making it super easy for them to talk about the product and why people should buy the product is really a key in Canada, certainly.